So a warm welcome to those of you in church and those of you watching online for our reflection this afternoon, looking for meaning and purpose. My name is Ben Almond and I am a member of the ministry team here in St. Peter Mancroft Church. On Wednesdays, we look at aspects of human flourishing and how we as humans can survive and thrive in the world. And one of the most important aspects of looking at how we flourish in the world, how we get a sense of meaning in life and develop ourselves into better human beings, is in who we have in our lives around us, who we look up to and imitate. Role models are people, some of whom we choose and others of which are thrust into our lives. And we can even have role models without realizing how we are being influenced by them. A role model was coined as a term by the sociologist Robert K. Merton, who hypothesized that individuals compare themselves with reference points of people who occupy the social role to which that individual aspires. It is important, I think, that our role models be good people with values and attributes that are wise and sensible for us to copy, and not people who lead us astray. They can be present with us regularly throughout our week, or be people we see occasionally at certain times for certain events, or even characters in fiction or public life, far removed from our own. And what we can often forget is that these role models in our lives often had and indeed still have role models of their own. But why are having role models important? Well, this afternoon I wanted to reflect on two key aspects that role models can have and what I have seen in a couple of my own role models. And also, too, on what we should look for when considering our own role models and people who we look to emulate and look up to. These can be, firstly, as people who set the bar or standard to compare ourselves with, and secondly, as people who show us good values to emulate and copy. I can remember in school one particular biology teacher I had, who I will rename for this reflection to Mr. Smith, who was an absolutely amazing teacher. Mr. Smith had the ability to communicate about any topic on our course in great depth and knowledge in an engaging and fun way. He drew colourful and memorable diagrams on the whiteboard that were often far better than the ones in the textbook, to the extent that at one point I rather cautiously asked him whether I could take a photograph of them to keep them for my revision work instead of what was in our books. But Mr. Smith was also a very discerning judge of human character. And I can remember thinking to myself when, as I will next year be a teacher, that I can only hope I am half the teacher that he is. I remember him particularly when doing my GCSEs that I, at that point, a pupil struggling with the subject and not being in his class, was invited along by him to join others in his lunchtime revision sessions and really notice the equal care and respect that I was given there. Here I was, as a student, who in doing well would have given no good grade to go down under his name, but who nevertheless gave out benevolently to others in need of help. He set the standard for me as to what a good teacher looks like, and the bar is for me to reach in how other teachers should behave towards students, both inside and outside of the classroom. I'm sure we all know of other people in different areas who really set the standard for us in the same way in other walks of life. But role models too, as I said in my introduction, also give us good values to emulate and copy. This is important, as if we are to admire someone, we have to be conscious about how they live their lives to ensure that we are selective in copying their good values and not picking up on any bad beliefs. When I reflect on this, I think particularly of my grandfather, who would often, as we went out to a restaurant, leave a tip for the waiter. This was not always the case, but it was noticeable to me as a child and was done often subtly and not ungenerously, and I think showed something of his nature in trying always to look out for others. But I can remember one restaurant we visited in Coventry when we had the worst waiter I can ever recall having. He was sharp with us, he was rude when he took the order, he was arrogant in his manners and address towards us, something which did not change at all as we moved on to order one course to the next. And I can remember sort of getting to the end of the meal and perhaps subconsciously thinking, well, I doubt he'll leave a tip this time, given the service that we have had. And to my astonishment and shock, without saying a word to any of us, he left on the table a £20 note with the receipt, which the waiter was clearly very surprised to have received. My guess is that he had been used to getting a tip while serving that evening. And we fumbled into the car and drove home. I can remember thinking of nothing else from the 10-minute period that he put the money down to the point where we were in the car on the drive home, when I asked him, one-to-one, very quietly, while other people in the car were talking, why on earth he decided to tip this waiter, let alone someone who had been so awful with us in his service. His answer, said with gentle frankness and without any apology, was, and I can remember this so clearly, I know he wasn't very kind towards us, he said, but I had hoped that by giving him a generous tip, that he would be much nicer with the next people that he would serve that evening. You know, one of those moments when the weight of what someone has just said to you absolutely knocks you speechless. Well, that was one for me. And here I thought was someone with values around giving, selflessness, and generous thought to others that I would do well on to dwell and consider in my own life. And let me end by turning the question now towards you. Who do you have and have you had as good role models in your lives? Are you only keeping good role models? And perhaps, just as importantly, are you, by the position you hold and things which you do, a good role model to others? Thank you.